Hi, thanks for joining me again. Since I last rode, I've had a couple of days off. First one just because I needed an easy day, and then the second one because life just got in the way and I didn't get a chance to get on the bike as I intended. So this session got bumped back by a day. So I've done 3 sessions now since I started back, and you've probably noticed they've all been quite intense. In the last one, following on from the GCN discussion, I tried to ride at 95% of 20-minute max power for an hour. So after that, I was feeling pretty tired. And in fact, even today, I still don't feel like doing anything intense like that, and nor do I think it's entirely necessary. But I've come up with a kind of an easy interval training session, shall we call it. So we know what my maximum 20-minute power is. Approximately, it's 205 watts. And we know I can hold 205 watts for 20 minutes. What I plan to do today, though, is to hold it for 30 minutes. Now, of course, I can't do 30 minutes at 205 watts straight off. But what I can do is structure it with recovery periods along the way so that I can make that manageable. And in that way, I've accumulated more training at my FTP than I could possibly do in in one continuous effort. So what I've done is set up my trainer to do 1 minute on, 1 minute easy, 1 minute on, 1 minute easy. And therefore, over the course of an hour, I'll do 30 minutes of hard effort, but with a minute easy between each one. And that should mean that I do a kind of moderately stressful training session. Not too hard, because I'm only going up to FTP, which should be sustainable for 20 or so minutes, and I'm getting plenty of recovery along the way. By training in this way, I can accumulate more time at FTP intensity than I would from a straightforward ride. So I'm making the intervals work to my advantage that way. But also, it's structuring a 1 hour ride and hopefully making 1 hour pedaling indoors a little bit more interesting than it would be from a continuous effort. Okay, so I'll check in with you along the way, just so you can get a feel for how the intervals are unfolding, and I'm about to start them now. See you in a bit. Okay, you're joining me at the end of my 10th effort, so I'm 20 minutes in now, and it's working out quite nicely. You can probably hear I'm going to work reasonably hard. Just as I get to the end of each effort, I can start to feel my legs burning a little bit, and I'm glad of the recovery period. So I'm just coming up to the end of this 10th effort right now. My heart rate's rising up gradually. So 143 at the moment, and now I pass through the recovery period. And I've set my recovery intensity at 125 watts. So the same as I began the slow ramp test actually, and that's working out quite nicely. My heart rate continues to rise into the recovery period for a few seconds, peaks then at 147, and then drops away into the 130s during this easy minute recovery. And I'll know when I start to get cooked, because my recovery heart rate won't be dropping so much, and the overall pattern will continue to trend up. So far, it's working out quite nicely though. Here I am, halfway through my 20th interval now, which means I've accumulated 20 minutes at my maximum 20-minute power. And as you can see, I'm nothing like as stressed as I was at the end of the 20-minute all-out effort because of those recovery periods. Of course, those 1 minute intervals, and luckily this one's just coming up to an end now, continually move my metabolism up and down, and there's a bit of a lag there too. So now as I move into recovery, still my heart rate's going up, and it's peaking at about 147, 148. And I'm 15 seconds into recovery. And that's just the lag in my body's responses. But it's also the secret to these intervals too. So they're long enough to push my metabolism up and down repeatedly. If they were shorter, that might not happen to the same extent. But the recoveries give me enough time to get my breath back between each one, allow my metabolism to come back down, so I can accumulate this work at a much higher intensity than if I was doing a constant effort. So you're joining me halfway through my last interval now, 59.5 minutes done, and I've accumulated nearly 30 minutes at my 20 minute max. So this is a nice feeling to have in the session that I know I've extended my limits in some way. Having said that, I'm just coming up to the end of this last interval now. It's also probably the easiest session, the easiest intervals you'll see me do. So why do I say it's the easiest? Well, will I do shorter interval sessions? Yes, but they'll also be more intense. Now, when I start each interval, I'm coming from a lower intensity where my cardiorespiratory system is not under stress. I start the interval and my cardiorespiratory responses start to rise, but they don't do that straight away. If I changed intervals and done the 30-second effort at threshold, I'd only be part way in terms of the cardiorespiratory adjustments before I hit the recovery period and it comes back down again. So it's kind of not worth doing an aerobic based interval with really short intervals unless you're doing it for a very specific targeted reason. Anyway, thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you again for the next session soon. Hi there, thanks for joining me again. In the debate about appropriate exercise intensities and how you set the right level for each zone and that kind of thing, one seemingly really important point often seems to be a little overlooked. And that's not how you set the intensity, but rather how long should you ride at that intensity for? Fortunately, I'm not the only one that's been puzzled by this. Hoffman and colleagues found that it was at 68% of your maximum duration that this fatigue started to kick in. So what I thought I'd do today is ride for 68% of the time that it took me to reach exhaustion in my trial at predicted FTP. So I'll check in at a couple of points along the way and then we'll see how I get on with that by the end of the ride. And if I feel like I'm just starting to get tired, which is what Hoffman's observations and study would predict, once I get to 35 minutes. So I'm stopping well before I reach my maximum, but have done enough to start to elicit some signs of fatigue. So you're joining me halfway through today's session where I'm trying to ride at my predicted FTP 195 watts, but rather than do the full 51 minutes, instead I'm trying to do 68% of that, and 68% of 51 minutes works out around 35 minutes. So far, being just over halfway into this ride, I'd say it feels like I'm working really hard. I know this is pretty close to FTP. I can feel the intensity, but it's also really motivating knowing that despite the fact I'm working hard now, I'm going to finish just before it really starts to bite and the fatigue starts to kick in. So I'll join you again at the end of the ride. Interesting. You join me at 5 minutes to go, 30 minutes into my 35-minute ride, and I felt strong and on top of the ride up to now. Heart rate between 145, 150, perception of effort 8. Now, it's just starting to feel like it's sliding away from me. Perception of effort 8.5, my pulse has crept up to 155. But less than 5 minutes to go now, so I'll join you at the end. Well, I'm into the last 30 seconds of my 35-minute ride at my predicted FTP. The same intensity I kept going for 51 minutes a couple of sessions ago. And I have to say, Hoffman and colleagues seem to have got this absolutely right. I'm just starting to get to that stage now where I'm thinking I'm having to dig in, wondering how I'm going to hang on any longer. And bear with me 1 second because that's the time up. So I'm just removing the resistance and warming down now. My heart rate went up to 156 by the end, pretty much where I'd expect to be for that intensity at this point. And my effort was sliding towards 9, but I definitely didn't feel like I had to dig that effort out of the barrel, as it were. Finishing now, I feel little bit tired, not exhausted, could definitely go on. A couple of minutes recovery, I'd be ready to go again. Maybe not the full 35 minutes, but could certainly take another decent chunk out of it. So how do we use this? Well, Hoffman would argue that if you go for 60% of your maximum, you're well below that 70% threshold, and you can't necessarily expect to get a positive training benefit from the session. You can reinforce your current status, hold it the same, but if you want to move forwards, you probably need to accumulate some fatigue, and that fatigue really starts to come on strong at 68% of the time that you can do. Another thing I should add is this idea is not specific to FTP. It should work above it. So for example, with my 20-minute max at 205 watts, I could ride for 70% of my 20 minutes. So that would be about 14 minutes. And I should get the same kind of feeling where I feel like I've worked hard, but the fatigue is only just starting to stack up, and that's above FTP. And Hoffman actually did most of his work below FTP, so at lower intensities, so much longer rides. So the idea is that this concept works at a range of different intensities. And of course, if you're in a condition where you want to avoid fatigue, maybe you're in recovery mode, getting ready for a race, that kind of thing, then it becomes the cutoff for you in terms of saying, okay, stop at this point. Hope you enjoyed that session. Please join me again on my next ride. See you soon. Hello, thanks for joining me again. I am now 10 days into my resumed training. In that time, I've done 6 different sessions. One yesterday, which I haven't documented, which was just a nice, easy ride outside. The rest, I've been vlogging about as I'm doing them. So today, I thought, as I'm 10 days in, let's have a look and see if we can spot any signs of progress. So if you remember on the very first vlog I did, I rode a 5-watt incremental test for as long as I could. So I thought I'd repeat that same session today. So we'll see how the test goes. So you've joined me when I'm 10 minutes in to my slow ramp test that I'm repeating from day 1 of this vlog. And I started at 125 watts, and now I've been increasing at 5 watts per minute. So I'm now at 175 watts. And my initial perception is it feels a little bit easier than the last time I did it. Now, unfortunately, I can't be completely sure because I don't have heart rate data for the whole test, but hopefully I'll be able to compare the numbers for this early section, and I'll present those later if I do have enough data to show you. But as I said, so far it all feels good. However, it's really the second half of the test where it begins to bite and the real comparisons can be made. Last time I got up to 25 minutes and averaged at the max 247 watts for the last minute of the test. So I've got a little way to go before we get there, but I'll join you again in about 20 minutes. Okay, here I am at 20 minutes into the test, 225 watts now, and I'm starting to feel a bit tired. I'm pretty confident I've got 5 more minutes in me, but it won't be easy. So maybe I've moved on a little bit, not a huge amount, but for 10 days of training, if I have moved on, I'll be happy with that. Join me again at the end of the test. 24 minutes, 1 more minute to match last week's test. And there we have it, 25, and I'll keep going for a few more seconds. A nice result in that I clearly had, at least in my own mind, a little bit more left in this tank. After 25 minutes, I rode on for another 30 seconds. My recollection from last week was that my heart rate at that point was 166. Today, 163. So, a small drop. It's a move in the right direction, so I'll take any changes that come, and I'm grateful for those. I've been training quite intensely, or riding quite intensely, to illustrate a few different things. linking in with the appearance I made on GCN as well. So I haven't necessarily designed the training here to provide the maximum improvement that I might be capable of. But I will have a couple of hits out where I'll tell you I'm intentionally pushing hard in training to move my fitness forward, but it won't be just yet. But when I do that, I'll let you know, and we'll see whether I can squeeze out a bigger gain in the really focused weeks to come. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again for the next session.